Welcome back to Have You Heard, the social media podcast by us here at The Social Shepherd, where we tell you everything you need to know about social if you work in digital. My name is Zoe and I'm one of the co-founders and CEO here at The Social Shepherd. And today I'm joined by...
Matt, I'm a senior paid media executive here at The Social Shepherd.
Lovely. And...
I'm Andy, I'm non-exec chair for TSS.
Fabulous. So we've got it all today. So we're going to jump straight into industry updates. So I will just give like a brief overview of the updates and feel free to ask questions, just whatever you want. So our favorite topic, everyone loves to talk about Gen Z these days because they've broken the marketing funnel and they are an enigma to most. But Gen Z prefer fan-made content. So YouTube has released its annual Culture and Trends report, which highlights how fan culture is turning Gen Z into video content creators. And basically what the report says is that we're going to talk about Taylor Swift in this podcast. So we'll use her as an example. But if we take like the Taylor Swift Eras
Tour, I'll go with that.
I'm really self-conscious of my accent today because people on LinkedIn and TikTok have been bullying me for my accent on the podcast.
Ignore them.
So no hate comments for my Northern Irish accent on this, please. But the Eras Tour. So say, for example, we took that. The content that Taylor Swift's own account might post or her record label might post of like the professionally shot content from her concert isn't performing as well as the fan-made stuff. So the content that the fans are taking off the show, basically. And what the report basically says is that Gen Z are spending more time consuming content around being a fan than actually doing the thing or seeing the thing that they're a fan of itself. So it's all this thing about like fan culture. And I think it really applies to experiences and like the music world, the film world, like talent. But thinking about how we can translate that. Sorry, firstly, before we go into that, are you a Gen Z?
I was born in 97, does that?
Yeah, you're a Gen Z.
I'm just about
do
in
you, and you love music.
I
so
absolutely love music.
Do you spend time consuming fan edits, basically?
Very much so. I'd say it would give a more accurate representation of probably what to expect from the gig itself. If an artist is going to release any content about their overall performance, they might pick their favourite song from the night, or it might be quite a heavily edited clip. That's not saying anything about Taylor Swift because she's a fantastic performer, but it gives a more accurate representation of what I would expect to see as a fan. So 100% I would.
And if you were going to a gig, would you search in like TikTok or YouTube to kind of know what the gig's going to be about before you get there?
Absolutely, unless I was really inclined to not want to spoil a particular gig. But other than that, 100% it gives the most accurate representation of what I could expect to see on the night. Yeah.
Okay. And Andy, you're not a Gen Z.
I think I'm baby boomer.
Boomer! Sorry. But what do you think about how Gen Zs are kind of acting around fandom? Does it make sense to you? To me, it's not really a massive shock, but it's interesting to...
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's logical. I mean, I think that Gen Z has actually sort of like brought quite an entrepreneurial sort of like approach to things, and they can't see the solution that's there, and they kind of go round it. And sometimes I think the going round it is seen as a sort of a bit of a neg, but it's actually sort of like, it doesn't quite work. Let's find a quicker way of doing it.
And you can actually make money off of doing this as well.
Exactly.
Like the platforms have creator funds. So if you're posting just repurposed fan content on an account and it's performing really well, you can actually make a revenue from that, which is insane. And wasn't really possible probably like 20 years ago.
No, I think a lot of sort of fan creator content has helped me to find new bands and artists, particularly when it comes around to music as well. So I think TikTok in particular has been really good for that.
Yeah, because I guess it's almost if you're a creator posting that type of content, you'll get to know that creator for having a similar music taste to you. So you'll then trust their recommendations of what else to look at.
Exactly.
So it's all about trust. But I think one of the things I was thinking about whenever reading this was it's basically earned media for the artist in that moment. So, and we've seen a massive rise, like a lot of clients are coming to us with briefs at the minute to say, how can we increase our earned media? So for those listening that don't know what that is, but that's basically the amount of people that are talking about your brand, that you haven't paid them, they're not an influencer of any sort, they're just consumers that are posting content about how much they love your product or them using your product. And then, you know, a lot of brands will ask for usage rights and ask if they can share it on their own page. But I guess for the younger generations, brand is kind of, I guess, and you'll probably be able to attest to this, has this always been the case? At the minute, brand is kind of built by what other people say about you, not by what you say about yourself as a brand.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting.
Someone else telling your story for you has a whole load more weight than you telling it yourself.
Yeah. Nice. So yeah, not really a massive shock that Gen Z prefer fan-made content, and we can carry that through into sort of the more product-based brands that we work with as well. An interesting one, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago as well, was TikTok copyright. Massive thing on TikTok because I don't know what it is, but because of the whole, if it's an original sound, it can be it's available to be used by a business. And that original sound could contain copyrighted music in it, whereas Meta stamped down on that significantly more. So if you were on a business account on Instagram and you're trying to find music to go behind a reel, you will find it much more harder to be able to find sounds that have pieces of copyright in them. And then on TikTok, you'll have the original track that is linked to the artist and the record label. So I don't know, on the topic of Taylor Swift, Shake It Off by Taylor Swift, there will be an official one there that won't be available for use by businesses. Because it's copyrighted, obviously. But then people will take that clip, not take the clip, but they'll record another version of it, same song, and it'll just say original audio on it. And brands are using the original audio to say, because it's not claimed by the author or the artist or the label, we can then use that on our content because TikTok aren't stamping down and saying that's not original, that's copyrighted from this source over here. So TikTok copyright is a bit of a minefield. We recently saw Marriott, which we talked about. They got sued for like millions upon millions, but that was really because they were using copyrighted content in their TikTok ads. But TikTok have released a report which basically tells us how many copyright notices they're getting on an annual basis and the success rate of them actually taking the content down. So there's a lot of data on this, so bear with.
This is original artists actually asking for...
It's the original source, realistically. So it could be, like, most likely it'll be like record labels and stuff like that. But it could also be film studios if people are using clips from that. Because a lot of people upload, like, part 2 of this episode on TikTok, and that's like you can watch them step by step, and obviously that's copyright as well. But just looking at this, there's a graph. Hang on, I'm not supposed to do this on the podcast because it puts my camera out of focus, but you can see from July to December 2023 there was 272,555 copyright removal requests, and there was only 152,830 that were actually successfully removed. So we're talking just over sort of a 50% success rate, about 56% there. The interesting thing about it is on Meta, if you put a copyright file against something, they're most likely to just take it down anyway. So they'll take it down and then you have to appeal against it yourself. So they kind of err more on the side of the person that's putting the request in to take it down. Whereas I guess on TikTok, they're slightly more lenient from that perspective.
Yeah, Meta seems to be really on it, particularly for paid content, even if you can get away with it organically and maybe put a piece of music up that perhaps shouldn't be on there. On paid, if you then try and boost that, you've got next to no chance of getting it through, to be completely honest. It's almost like there's that second barrier that's up, actually preventing people from going ahead of it, so to speak.
Yeah, 100%. I guess, Andy, it'd be interesting to hear from you because you've been brand and client side. brand and agency side. And it's all about the toss up of like the risk versus the reward. And this is not our suggestion necessarily as an agency, just to say there's a legal and an illegal way to do this, okay? But a lot of brands, you know, there is a gray area with TikTok and with copyright. But from a brand perspective, if we came to you as an agency and said, look, what's your stance on copyright on TikTok? You know, there's a really low risk if you're using original sounds that you're going to get sort of penalized for that. And your content's going to perform better if you use it, versus you can not use it, but your content's not going to perform as well. And you have absolutely no risk of being penalized legally.
I think it would depend very, very much on which brand, which brand you were talking about. I would say the majority of brands that I've actually worked for would probably be more cautious.
Yeah.
But there's no doubt there's brands out there that would take a risk. I'm unclear on where if you mentioned Meta there, and if Meta chose to leave something up, then ultimately does the person who's asked for it to be taken down, do they ultimately sue Meta, or do they potentially sue the original person that's put it up? Where's the line drawn? Where's the line drawn?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Meta, I think if you put a claim, if it is copyrighted music, they can tell if it's copyrighted. And then if you have the rights to it, you have to upload a certificate to appeal it. Yeah. So if there's any like cloud in judgment or uncertainty that you have the rights to that, they'll just take it down.
Right.
Whereas TikTok, grey area.
Grey. Interesting.
Yeah, but I guess we'll see what happens there. Yeah. Obviously, they had the UMG stuff happen as well, which was interesting. From a paid perspective, Matt, what do you see happen if you use original sounds? Because you can use sponsored sounds as well on TikTok ads. What's the paid stance on it?
It's a good question. I'd say there needs to be a bit more clarity from a paid perspective as well, to be completely honest.
And I think that's fair too. Like, I was at a TikTok event about 6 months ago now, and someone put their hand up and said, when are we going to talk about like whether it's actually legal for us to use these original sounds? And they just went, moving on, and they just didn't want to talk about it, basically. So I think the platform itself, you know, love TikTok, but they don't necessarily give us the best clarity on that stuff.
I think as a rule of thumb, it's not something that we'd actively be advising clients at this moment in time, to be completely honest, until there's more groundwork done into it.
100%. And I think anything with paid media behind it, it's a different ball game compared to organic. So agree. Good approach, Matt. Well done. TikTok's finally updated its save function, so you can download your content without a watermark on it, which will make it easier to cross post onto Instagram Reels. That's good for us that they've done that. It makes it easier for us to cross-post stuff. I guess from their perspective, they're losing that brand. But people were doing it anyway. You can just go to like Snaptic and take off the watermark. So I guess it's just keeping people on platform rather than taking content off and downloading it straight from there. Yeah, great. Thanks, TikTok. That's helpful.
Will they want anything in return in the longer term for that? I suppose that's the only question, isn't it? But if they've made that step now, then presumably it's one they're going to stick with.
Yeah, I don't know if they could get from it, though.
No.
They can't ask people to pay for downloading something without a watermark whenever there's so many free channels that will just do it for you.
Yes, really true.
So yeah, interesting. And then this one is our favorite topic of AI. So Meta has tweaked their made with AI labels, which you find on content that have been made with artificial intelligence. And it now says AI info to clarify any confusion the users have about the content. I think AI is something that's coming more and more into our content and our lives. So I think that's helpful that it's being clarified. I'm just reading a little bit more information on it. Oh, so they're adding AI info labels to a wider range of video, audio, and image content when we detect industry standard AI image indicators or when people disclose that they're uploading AI generated content. So it's just understanding what the purpose is behind the content, basically. So any clarity is always good. And then one final update that we have is, so Meta launched an ad-free subscription, so you could be on their platforms without any ads coming up. Now, they only launched it within Europe, but the EU Commission has ruled that their ad-free subscription fails to comply with the DMA, which is the Digital Marketers Act. I guess, however, data campaigners claim that asking users to pay for privacy goes against GDPR rules and encourages data capitalism. I think the motivation for people to pay for an ad-free Facebook or Instagram isn't necessarily going to be a data protection motivation. It's just I don't want to be pestered on the platform.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about you can, with your TV, you can choose to pay $3.99 or $4.99 a month and not have ads on your ITVX or whatever. So they seem to make it work.
Yeah, I think the thing is here, they've said it's violating a data protection issue, but the motivation for consumers wouldn't be data protection anyway. It would just be enjoyability of the platform. But the breach of the DMA could see Meta fined up to 10% of its total worldwide turnover. So that's going to be a hefty bill if that goes through. Cool. Those are our industry updates over. So we're going to... Matt, you had a topic that you wanted to talk about today, which was Glastonbury, which makes sense.
Any excuse to talk about Glastonbury?
Yeah. So do you want to give us a little bit of an overview of what you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, effectively just how TikTok is becoming more important as a platform for Glastonbury now. I was looking through trends earlier, and 3 of the top 10 trends in the UK in the last 10 days were of Glastonbury in terms of the actual views, and the 3 most viewed trends were of Glastonbury itself. So hashtag Glastonbury, hashtag Glasto, and hashtag Glastonbury 2024. So I think going back to our point earlier about sort of user-generated content, TikTok's really becoming a platform of choice for people to do that for Glastonbury now, which is really exciting.
Yeah, 100%. And I think when we're talking about what's trending and stuff, that's where those cultural moments are really important for brands to tap into. And just because you're not an artist or you're not a brand that has a stand at Glastonbury doesn't mean that you can't participate in those cultural moments for your audience as well. And because it is over a shorter time period, the trends that are like this and then they go straight up over a really short period of time, they're the best ones to hop on as well, because they have the highest relevancy from a search term perspective over that short time period. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense. One of the things that we wanted to kind of compare it to was Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, isn't that correct?
That is correct indeed. So Glastonbury as a trend in the last 7 days has seen more sort of overall views than the TS, the Eras Tour trend. Sorry, Swifties, but just important to point that out. However, Taylor Swift's tour has obviously left the UK at this moment in time, and she's gone elsewhere. So when she returns to Wembley next month, I'd expect to see that spike really come back up again. And it'd be interesting to do a direct comparison between Glastonbury now, kind of in the last 7 days, and then what happens when Taylor Swift returns to the UK as well. So Glastonbury is very... as much as being a global festival and known worldwide now, it's still, in terms of trends on TikTok, it's very much UK based. Whereas when you look at Taylor Swift globally, wherever she is on the planet,
she's taking over the world.
The numbers are astonishing. Like I still levels of fame. Like I still can't comprehend how famous she actually is. It's incredible. Like fair play to her.
We did a pitch recently for a beauty brand, and we were looking into the Pinterest search volumes for the 18 to sort of 44 age range in women, but specifically in the beauty category. And like the top terms for the last 3 months were Sabrina Carpenter makeup looks. Have you heard Espresso, Andy?
Well, no.
We'll play it for you afterwards, okay? We'll have you singing it. And Eras Tour makeup, but it was like 5 of the search trends were all related to, it was like Reputation makeup, Lovers makeup, Eras World Tour, Eras, it was everything basically. It was all Taylor Swift, and she just completely dominated that market in terms of search trends. So it's a whole thing. But then I'm sure if we looked back at Pinterest search trends this week, you would have a whole lot of Glastonbury related terms as well in there, like festival makeup looks and probably some Glastonbury trends in there as well. So it's interesting, isn't it? How it kind of,
given the age range as well, from the actual visitors to Glastonbury itself, and essentially talking about a look, what it looks like. You're going to be having people there in your Gen Z category. You're also going to be having sort of like baby boomer in the same shot, aren't you?
Yeah, Glastonbury was an interesting one this year because you had like Dua Lipa. Love Dua Lipa.
Yeah.
It doesn't scream Glastonbury to me though.
It's an interesting one. Glastonbury, I suppose, historically as a festival, has all supported artists that are just on their way up to becoming massive. And I feel Dua Lipa's had, since the Barbie movie, to be honest, Dua Lipa's really taken off, hasn't she? So I'd say it's probably, the right time before she goes to that next level now. But yeah, I understand where you're coming from as well.
Like Coldplay makes sense to me for Glasto. Like that makes sense. But then SZA, that kind of went down like a bit of a lead balloon, to be honest. And I think they maybe misread the demographic of the festival, because SZA's huge, but it's kind of giving Coachella more than it's giving Glastonbury.
They traditionally on the Sunday night did have more of a legend on at Glastonbury.
Like it was Elton, didn't they? Before?
Elton last year. So that was amazing, by the way. So maybe just didn't quite get the scheduling quite right, is the opinion this year.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
On Sabrina Carpenter as well, going back to that, she obviously supported Taylor Swift on tour, so she's obviously done fantastically
the two
in her
of
own
them,
right.
a little dream team.
You do
and
wonder.
One's very tall and one's very small.
I think Espresso's the song of the year, by the way. That's a great song, that is. So.
Oh, we can get you on a karaoke. Cool. And then moving on to our next sort of point was the White House has announced its first ever creator economy conference. Now, I must admit, I don't actually know a lot about this at the minute, but basically the US government is buying into the creator economy, with the White House announcing an upcoming conference where industry experts and creators themselves will be invited to meet with government officials to discuss their opportunities, challenges, and more in order to inform better related policies. So I guess it's just buying into the whole thing of being a creator being a legitimized job and it being treated as an industry, if that makes sense, as much as, working in marketing. But I guess if you're a creator, you kind of do work in marketing as well. Would we put it, it's kind of between, this could be controversial, between acting and working in marketing. Being a creator. But I think it is an industry and so many people do it. But I'd say sometimes few do it very well.
I suppose the interesting one with that as well is whether a visit to the White House is seen by a creator as them representing certain politics or parties. It'd be interesting to see how that could
that's an interesting
define
point.
Their brand image and voice potentially, because it may just seem like a visit to an important place, but could that be seen by some of their supporters as an endorsement of certain things? It's a really challenging one for brands and creators to get right.
It's interesting in the US because they do get influencers much more involved in politics. Like I haven't actually seen too much of it in the UK. Like I haven't seen anyone that's any parties from like the general election or anything like in influencer content, but like Logan Paul just interviewed Donald Trump, for example. Like they've done that before. They've done that before with the Nelk.
Yeah.
I think they did that with him before too. Now a lot of people will kind of say that that's indicative because Trump has always kind of been on that like challenger side of marketing and branding, and so that's where he's like tapping into that like younger demographic a little bit more. I don't think Biden's done as much of that kind of stuff. I haven't seen him as heavily promoted on YouTube within that sort of realm. But you are right in the sense that the fact that the White House is taking this initiative kind of speaks that they're taking it a little bit more seriously. I will say I do actually think that in the UK they do have these types of initiatives for creatives at number 10. I just don't know if it's as heavily publicized as this one is. Some of the stuff they're going to be talking about is fair pay, the impact of AI. I don't know if you guys have seen the AI influencers you can get on TikTok now.
Yeah.
Mental health, which is obviously massive for them because, I mean, they're literally just going to be, I think it's any audience you build up if you were a celebrity, you would have traditionally years ago been attacked by the tabloids, whereas now they're being attacked on their own personal socials and stuff.
Yeah.
But is that kind of the price you pay for being a creator? In the same way that if you were a celebrity?
I guess so. I mean, if you're dipping your toe into something where you can have 10 people in a room that are all mates and you're all going to actually completely disagree because it's such a massive scope topic, isn't it? So you're probably going to pick up some sort of like enemies along the way, aren't you?
Yeah, 100%. And then on the topic of politics,
oh, good.
Yeah, so there's no political opinions, please, just purely marketing opinions. So the UK political parties in the lead up to the general election, they've done some interesting and controversial stuff on TikTok in particular. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of it was just kind of bashing the other parties, and it wasn't necessarily done in the most, I don't know if it was necessarily setting a good example for young people in terms of how you should approach competition. But the Drum has asked specialists as to who they think deemed what party had the best TikTok campaign in the run up to the election. Just having a look.
I think pretty much the ones that I saw were all very much what was wrong with the other party or parties rather than what was great about them. Yeah,
so Farage has got 800,000 followers compared to Labour's 200,000 followers and the Conservatives 67,000 followers. We also actually had a conversation about if it's the individuals, not the parties, brand, then how does that get monitored? Who's approving that content? Do you know what I mean? If they're speaking on behalf of a party. I don't actually know if it's right to sit down and say who had the better campaign run up. I think Labour, great marketing strategy to get in front of young people, but was it the right thing to do around that topic? Probably not, to be entirely honest. It came across as a little bit distasteful at times.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's nearly over now, so maybe they'll just chill out and get off our TikTok screens. Fine, okay. And then one thing I want to talk about, which is my exciting topic for the day, was, so we've got Matt, our Gen Z, in the room. I am a millennial. You are a boomer, Andy. And you've obviously worked in the advertising industry for much longer than Matt or I have. And I think I came into the industry pre-COVID, had 3 years of working experience. And the culture even back then was so different to the working culture now. It was very much, you were in the standard working hours were 9 to 5. You were in the office every single day. And if I'm entirely honest, no one left my office, not this office, but the office I worked in before 7 o'clock. And it was kind of a bit like, oh, you off early type thing if you left before that. So I wanted to kind of understand, if we compare where we are now where we are now is 10. No, where we are now is 0. Mad Men, the TV show, is 10. Where, whenever you were working in agencies 15 years ago, where were we on the scale from now to Mad Men?
Oh, 10, 15 years ago. I think the timing you describe was definitely prevalent, especially around pitches. It was sort of like the whole pitch process was, having a war room. Everyone did the sort of day job work, with your BAU for your client, and then you sort of start doing your pitch, and you'd be there at sort of 2 o'clock in the morning, and someone else would sort of rock up at 6 o'clock in the morning with some bacon sandwiches, and it just sort of could be quite carnage-like. I suppose the big difference is if you compare that to sort of I suppose I worked for a retailer in the late 80s. And so you had a sort of an internal design studio creative. You had external, basically artwork studios that used to take the creative and then put them on boards and then mark them up to say, well, this is yellow, this is blue, this is magenta. And that would happen. And then that would go off to someone else. And you had this massive if you like, supply chain. And during that period was when we talk about things like AI now, which is obviously, off the scale. But even back then, you were going from taking this sort of like nice, steady process where you'd hand things over to having suddenly a sort of like the Apple Mac appearing, and you had somebody who sort of like with some IT skills was actually sort of doing a little bit of what printers used to do and a little bit of what a designer used to do and quite a lot of what an art worker used to do. So I think there's probably initially a bit of dip in quality as to what occurred. But still a fun time. I think it was, I was in London then, and it was very much, the weekend would start at sort of like 5:30 on the Friday before you actually sort of like even went home or whichever train you were catching. So there was that part of it was fun. I to be fair, I was never really close to Mad Men in terms of sort of like similarities there.
Yeah.
But definitely the timing now. I think the demand. I think clients are a little bit more are becoming more respectful of the agency. I think agencies are actually feeling more confident in turning around and saying, well, no, what are you actually asking us for, rather than just saying a name has called. We've got to drop everything. We've got to do more. I think especially when it's sort of like, one of the things I think is that used to be, we've got an internal team and they're great. However, can you just help us with this? And you do loads and loads of thinking as an agency, and then it's, we're not quite ready for it yet, or we don't quite like your costs or whatever. And then what you've talked about, suddenly becomes on pat. The other massive difference, of course, is back then, websites were sort of like, coming in their infancy, and that was really digital. That was your digital presence. Whereas now, obviously, digital's almost the thing you do first. And everything happens more quickly. Everything happens really quickly. Sign-off procedures are much quicker. Sometimes that means that I think perhaps there's an expectation from, both clients and consumers that if something's not perfect, there's sort of a bit exceptional. I'd rather have the gist of it quickly rather than right. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying I think that's how it can how it can work. But you used to have people running around across London with massive artwork bags carrying.
Yeah, I remember one of my old boss saying that he had the boards for the pitch and he'd accidentally left them on the train.
Yeah.
And so they turned up to a pitch and they had nothing to present and they had to do it just stood there.
Yeah. Well, I saw. I looked at one of the pitch docs the other day for TSS, and I think it had 97 pages on it, 97 slides. If you imagine sort of like, your Fomex boards mounted up and exactly what you'd be doing and how you'd be carrying those around. You need a team of 8 people to actually carry them.
What do you do if you got them printed and then there's a typo in them?
Well, it would be redone. I mean, but the other thing was, I think that's probably the whole copy checking bit, I think, which really came from the fact that if you were sort of like doing your letterpress printing back in the day, if you made a mistake, you had, there's quite a big deal that you had to make a whole new piece of metal sort of like correct. So the whole copy checking bit came from there and was really good. And I think that actually sort of was a bit diminished when it perhaps went into Macs, because it became much easier to just make a quick change. Mm-hmm. So back then you would have had a copy checking proofreading team. So before it went off, it would actually go through, to be printed, it would actually be read properly before.
Yeah. Nice. No, I understand the pitch thing because I was at a dinner a couple of weeks ago and someone was there who'd worked in agencies and has now gone into sort of consulting in some shape or form. And he was like, oh, well, you know what pitches are like. You work like a dog for 4 days, you don't sleep, and then you're in the pub at 9 a.m. the next day. And I was like, that doesn't really happen anymore. People, I'm like, I do think that Gen Z and millennials, we're better at setting boundaries a little bit where it's required, and that like it's not healthy to be in the pub at 9 o'clock after a pitch, even if you have worked for 4 days straight.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And that's not to say that like the generations are lazy of any shape or form, but I guess I don't know. It's interesting that I think post-COVID people do look for more balance, don't they?
Yeah, if you think about sort of like COVID in itself and that sort of like what that 2-3 years did, apart from maybe a little bit in the 70s when you had sort of like there was like a work to rule, and I know electricity was, I can remember, us not having electricity some nights, but that was for a very short period of time. But you think it was sort of like you almost have to go back to sort of like the Second World War, we're back to 1944-45 before generations of people were told that they could either go out, couldn't go out, and what time they could go out, and there wasn't necessarily going to be stuff on the shelf that irrespective of how much it was, you could not buy certain things, and that must have, and those people from before who'd seen it, now they're in the 90s. They're going to have been born in the 30s to actually remember it. So like 90, 91, 92. So you guys coming through as a sort of like, as young people when that was going through, that had to have an impact. You think about the people that came through uni at that time, and nobody really knew or had a clue how that was going to impact. You had sort of like, I know there were sort of like lots of young people suddenly actually started being used by the universities to actually sort of help them teach remotely, which seemed a really sensible initiative.
Yeah.
And also I think that question of, you mentioned Sarah, and we were walking back to the train station. There was just this queue of young people, and you could see some of them sort of walking to a different queue and everything. And it was sort of like and we were saying that it's right that someone is actually asking, why have I got to stand here when I can actually go and stand over there? And just, you've always done it, and that's the rule. That's what the handbook says, or whatever context you're in. So I think it's good that those things are being challenged. And,
I think just comfortability in terms of like voicing thoughts or like asking questions where people maybe would have been scared to before. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. From my perspective, it's interesting listening to it, because sometimes people have said to me, from your generation, they've kind of been indignant that something has or hasn't happened, and I'm thinking, is that really an issue? But what I found is that when I actually talk and explain stuff or explain my view on it, sometimes I come away thinking, well, do you know what, you had a really good point there. And sometimes the person leaves and goes, actually, I'm probably over-egged what was going on. So I like the ability to be able to have good direct conversations. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that's a benefit.
Nice. And then final question I have is, obviously you've worked with TSS since there's like 5 to 7 of us in the business.
I think there's you, Jack, Izzy, Mario.
Yeah.
And I think Millie, I think actually joined.
Yeah, so around 7, I'd say, kind of in the business if you include us too. And then Matt, how long have you been here for?
Just under 2 years. There's about 30 of us when I joined, so the growth's been amazing since I've joined here.
So I'll ask you this: what do you think has changed about the business on the journey from 30 to 65 that's good, and what do you miss? And you can be honest.
I mean, the expansion is obviously the really good thing. Like, if you'd have told me when I first joined that we'd have an office in America, if we'd been in London, I wouldn't have doubted you, but I thought, blimey, that's a big ambition to actually see it through is incredible. The bad, and it's not a bad of the business at all, but I suppose in the old office when we're a bit smaller, you just see everyone every single day, and not everyone wants to see everyone every single day, to be honest.
But you do.
Yeah, I do. It's like, so yeah, just occasionally you might go 3-4 days, sometimes a week without seeing certain people, which is so yeah, that's not a bad thing, but that's probably, as growth happens, that's what happens as well, isn't it? So Yeah, but yeah, I do realise I can't always say hello to everyone every single day. So it's like.
And Andy, what do you think have been like the major changes in the business, and what do you think have been the good and maybe the challenging parts of it?
So the good bit has definitely been working with you guys on where we want to get to and how we're gonna get there, and actually the speed with which collectively we've managed to make that happen is absolutely fantastic, and that's the good bit. Probably a little bit similar to what Matt says. It's sort of the sitting down with you and Jack for sort of like half an hour on sort of stuff that wasn't necessarily client related, but just sort of what we do and where we're going. That now has become something that has almost got to be sort of like fitted into a really tight schedule. So I think that like Matt says, not bad, but just sort of like just different. And I think that how we adapt to that going forward is going to be interesting, because America, London, own office in Bath, 70 odd humans actually producing great work. You got to be seeing a lot more good than anything else in that.
Absolutely. And at no point has it felt like an overwhelming change. It feels like we've taken the steps that we've needed to take at the right times. If you write down on paper the growth, it's madness. Some of the things we've done, to be honest, and how much we have actually grown, it's felt like a really nice natural transition that's come at the right time. So excited for the continuation of it.
Good. No, well, that's what we want to hear. Cool. Well, look, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone that's been listening or watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow us. It does mean the world to us. And we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Bye.